Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today I got a fun and exciting episode for you guys this evening because PCSX2 has just seen a massive update on the Stable Branch, bringing a ton of new features and changes and improvements to the PlayStation 2 emulator. And PCSX2 has been great for a long time, but there's going to be a lot of fundamental differences in this one, and I think you're going to enjoy all of them. So I'm going to go over what the differences are, how to set the entire emulator up, and get you up and running if you've never used PCSX2. And if you have, you still might learn something along the way, because as much as I love PlayStation 2 hardware and I have a metric ton of it, sometimes you just want to sit down and play something via emulation. And this episode is basically the start of a series called Emulation Night School, where I'm going to teach you how to use all of the most popular emulators. I actually had this saved before the 2.0 release, so I am redoing this video to bring you guys the most recent information, because when I did this it was on version 1.7.5 and I basically parked it in my hard drive, but now the best part is on the Stable Branch you're at 2.02 and on the nightly releases you're on 2.03. So right now there's basically parity between stable and nightly, although honestly if you're playing around I do still recommend you grab nightly just to make sure you have the most recent stuff. So you're going to see you have the installers right here, and that's going to be the first thing you need to do. And if you already have PCSX2, just go ahead and run an update. But again, I like the nightly branch. And the best part is Mac OS X is back. You can now use this on Macintosh PCs. It's going to recompile via Rosetta, but you should have more than enough grunt to get this thing done. Because honestly, if you have a recent computer in like the last 4 to 5 years, there's not really going to be anything on PCSX2 you're not going to be able to run. But if you have a potato that you're watching on right now, it might be a little bit more difficult. And go through the PCSX notes, because there are some Visual C++ redistributables you're going to want to have to make sure this runs as well. For the most part, if you've used anything recent on Steam, you're probably going to have these things. And of course, if this is your first setup, you're going to have a BIOS for the PlayStation 2. There are directions on how you can dump the BIOS from your own system, and that is technically what you should do, but however you want to do the BIOS, that is up to you. Just be aware that PCSX2, even in a 2.0 release, is still going to require a BIOS file, and usually you want to grab one for the US regions, for PAL, and for Japan, so you have compatibility across all of the release regions that PlayStation 2 would have had back in the day. So basically you can just go ahead and unzip PCSX2 wherever you want. You'll still see it says 1.75 just for using an old shop. You can go ahead and unpack it wherever you want, and you're still going to run the executable for the 2.0 version. Your folder should look like this, and it is agnostic as to where it actually installs. By the default, it's just going to take your system language and it's going to decide if you want a dark theme or a light theme, so you can go ahead and do either one of those. And I will get into some of the fundamental changes in a bit, but again, I want to make sure everyone understands how this works so you can have a good time with it. Wherever you put your BIOS files, you're going to have to navigate over to them and indicate to PCSX2 where to find those files. By default, it won't know. Honestly, I just leave a BIOS file or folder within the main installation folder as well. That way I know where everything is. You'll see the BIOS file up there. Just go ahead and pop all your BIOS into this folder, 1 for safekeeping and 2 so you know exactly where to navigate over. So you'll go ahead and browse to that directory and you'll hit refresh list, and you're going to see a USA, a European, and a Japanese BIOS file are going to show up for you. We now have the ability to run every single release game for PlayStation 2 as far as the regionality is concerned. From here, you'll go ahead and add a folder to where all your games are located. This is 100% up to you. You can make a games folder within the PCSX folder or somewhere near it, or you can put it anywhere on your hard drive. It honestly does not matter. You just need to remember where you put things. That way you can go ahead and get them in the right spot. You'll see I have an ISO file here for Ape Escape 3. Absolutely awesome game that I've talked about on the channel before. And I'm just going to go ahead and move that into the games folder so that it is nested within there. This is how I like to do things, but honestly, wherever you want to put your files is totally up to you. Just go ahead and hit add on the initial setup. If this is your first time with the 2.0 version, navigate to where you keep your games and go ahead and hit yes. Depending on how many games you add at once, scanning might take a few minutes, but honestly, it's pretty pretty fast in my experience, then just go ahead and hit next, and then you will see that PCSX is going to ingest everything. The other great part on the 2.0 release is automatic button mapping is here for controllers that use SDL or X input, something like an Xbox One or Series X controller. If you just go ahead and hit automatic mapping, it's going to find all of the different input devices you have, go ahead and select your controller, and then it'll automatically map every single button to exactly where it needs to be, which is an awesome situation. This means you don't have to go in and configure controllers per game or even per emulator. You can just do whatever you want. If you have a second controller plugged in, it works for that as well. It'll automatically detect your controller and set everything up for you. So that's an awesome quality of life feature. Once this is all done, you just go ahead and hit finish and you will be ready to run games. Now on the 2.0 release, there's going to be a lot of things under the hood that you may not be aware of. Things like plugins have been recompiled into the main code, so you're basically going to have all of the feature set of something like an older version of PCSX2, but you're really not going to see anything that you need to toggle outside of stuff like rendering resolutions, the different drivers you want to use, things such as that. And that is awesome because while PCSX2 is an absolutely outstanding emulator and still is, it was what I would consider a high-touch emulator. Sure, I just changed the screen resolution right there, but there are a lot of per-game fixes that you would want to apply and a lot of other toggles that you would need to play around with. Now a lot of that has been streamlined, and the best thing about something like PCSX2 is its ability to just absolutely make the PlayStation 2 look more like the PlayStation 3. You can go all the way up to 4K on most games, if not further, depending on the hardware you have in your system. I've got an i9-13900K and a 3080 Ti, but honestly, if you have a relatively modern CPU and GPU, you're going to be able to absolutely dial in a look you want, or you can just go straight software rendering and basically make it just look exactly like the PlayStation 2 you know, love, and remember, with all of those graphical kind of downgrades as it were. But as we actually jump into something like Ape Escape 3 here in full 4K, the ability of this emulator to just absolutely destroy games when it comes to making them look like they are modern is unprecedented. We're getting to DuckStation or Dolphin levels of just making a game look like it came out a full generation ahead of when it actually did. And that is the best thing about PCSX2, the unlimited options. There's going to be other things like full Vulkan support, and I'll show you how to select the Vulkan driver in just a moment, which is going to kind of give you a best of both worlds situation as to how to render these games, because Vulkan's absolutely blown up in the intervening years, and using that's definitely my go-to as well. And there is just a ton of games that work on this. If you are thinking about running a game you've never run before, there are full compatibility lists on the PCSX2 website as well, and I do recommend checking those out before you install a game, just so you know it's going to be good. But honestly, the list of games that don't work well on PCSX2 is tiny and shrinking, and you're going to see a lot of improvements on the 2.0 version. And you'll see here with Ape Escape 3, if you go to the wiki page, there's going to be a ton of different reports of who ran it and what they ran it on. And you can see there's a lot of different options in here as well. This is the old menu, and I'll bring you over to the new menu, but for the most part, they're going to be relatively the same. And again, you can update within PCSX2 as well. So if you have an older installation, click that look for update button. You can change or add directories for where you added the games from within the games list. You can have as many directories as you want, or you can keep everything in one directory. Honestly, the BIOS folder tab, once you have everything set, you can leave it as is, and I always check out fast boot just to not have to watch the full PlayStation 2 boot intro animation. But if you want that, just go ahead and uncheck it, and you'll basically get that full fat PlayStation 2 experience. So this is definitely an option that you want to toggle around if you want that nostalgia blast. And if you decide to move your games, you can just go ahead and reset this folder as well. You can move them to a different hard drive, whatever you want to do. And on the emulation side of things, for the most part, you don't really need to click anything whatsoever. By default, PCSX and the new PCSX2 version are going to do everything for you to get you the best compatibility. So honestly, I just highly recommend not really going into the emulation tab to do much of whatsoever. You'll see enable multi-threaded is automatically checked. Now in the graphics menu, you're going to see all of the different renderers you can use for PCSX2. Automatic is going to decide what it wants to do, and adapter default is going to basically default to whatever your graphics card is. But if you do have both a GPU as well as onboard graphics, you may want to go in here and make sure that your actual GPU is selected, because I have seen some instances in which it'll select your CPU's video out versus something on the GPU side of things. You can always play around with aspect ratios, full screen modes, and other widescreen patches that PCSX2 can implement now. So there's a lot of different ways to articulate the image. You can go ahead and do whatever you want. You can even do deinterlacing, which is going to be very nice on the games that did use interlacing. Having that deinterlacing filter applied above is always going to be fun. And on the 2.0 menu, you're going to see that basically near to everything looks the same from my previous demonstration, but I did force the renderer to Vulkan, and I made sure that my adapter was my GPU. Just go ahead and do these two things. You should have the best luck on all of them, and that is going to be fun. And you also have bilinear filtering. Now, in the other improvements under the hood, you're going to get things like big picture mode, which are going to be selectable from the file menu when you're actually running PCSX2. You can just jump to big screen mode, and you're going to have more of a couch gaming box experience and less of a Windows application front end. So that's going to be nice with a wireless controller. You're basically going to be able to play this thing like you're almost playing Steam in big picture mode. So that is a nice quality of life improvement. But so many of the other improvements are under the hood, taking the plugins and putting them into the main PCSX2 code, taking care of a lot of the independent game fixes for you. But for the most part, all of the other settings when you run PCSX2 2.0 or otherwise are basically going to be set exactly how you want them to. Honestly, as far as all of the memory cards are concerned, it's just going to make one for you. But you now have per game independent settings as well, so if you want to have a memory card just for one game, you can set that within the actual menu on the summary page and decide what it is you want to do. But honestly, one memory card for pretty much everything seems to be totally fine as far as I'm concerned, but you totally get to pick whatever you want. You can see by default enable widescreen patches are there, so you can use the patches and cheats to be able to make games run in widescreen if they can. You can just pop whatever patch you want over to the cheats menu and it'll automatically enable it, and you'll be playing something like Katamari here in widescreen mode. And that is the great thing about PCSX2. It has the infinite versatility to make a game look and play however you want. You can go software renderer 4x3 and it'll look exactly like a real PlayStation 2 console with a game in the DVD-ROM drive. You can go all the way to 4K with widescreen support and other graphical enhancements, and you can basically make it feel almost like a PlayStation 3 as far as the resolution and fidelity are concerned. But that is the great thing about emulation and PCSX2 in general. It's going to give you unlimited options to do whatever you want, and the compatibility is so great at this point and only getting better. Honestly, this is just a 10 out of 10 emulator. So now you know how to set it up, you know about version 2.0, you know how to get your BIOS files in there, how to indicate where your game folders are, and how to set up your controllers as well as your renderer and GPU. And those are basically all you need to know. Everything else is basically taken care of for you. But if you have any questions or run into any problems, leave me a comment down below. And if you like this series Emulation Night School, tell me as well, because I plan on running videos for setup guides for every major emulator out there. After that, we're done. Go play some PCSX and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.